What's up, everybody? Oh my goodness, I love it. I love popping on screen and already seeing a whole bunch of people watching. That's so cool. So thank you again, everyone, for coming and spending your Friday night with me, especially today, because it's Friday the 13th. Holy shit. That's so cool. Anyway, let me see what these comments are popping in already. That's awesome. So tonight is going to be fun. I'm very excited about tonight. Very, very excited. I have a guest tonight, so you won't have to listen to me all night long. You'll get to hear another guy, which is someone that I actually look up to, and I consult his work a lot. So I'll get to that in a second. For those of you that are new here or returning, I'm going to go over the rules, as always, because there is a podcast version of this that goes out, and I want to make sure everyone is clear on the rules. So rule number one is that this show is for paranormal related questions. Any questions about ghosts or UFOs or cryptids or religious miracles or whatever, and I will give you my skeptical opinion of it. It may not always be right, but we'll try and work it through. That leads me to rule number two, is that I don't know everything. And that's just the basic fact. So if you ask me a question I don't know, I will be honest with you. I'll look it up if I can, or I'll consult an expert, which tonight we have a guest expert. So that'll be great. I can push it on to him. Rule number three is follow the Patrick Swayze golden rule and be nice. This is for good discussions, good debate. I don't mind people getting into it, but be nice. Don't be a dick to each other, okay? Because I'll boot you out of here. And the rule number four, which is a new rule, it's not really new, but I've been trying to incorporate this in, is if you have a question for me or the guest that I have that night, please do me a favor and put question or Q in the beginning of your comment. And that helps me when I go through all the comments to pick them out and get to them quicker. So I don't have to go through the conversation you guys are having. So let me give you a bio on my guest tonight, and then I'll bring them on and we can get right to it. I hope you guys have questions. Also, sound off. Let me know what you're drinking tonight. But here's the bio. So tonight, let me get through this. We have Mick West. Mick is a writer and debunker. He used to be a video game programmer who now focuses on investigating and explaining conspiracy theories such as chemtrails, 9/11 controlled demolition, and false flags. He also covers topics such as UFOs, pseudoscience, flat Earth, photo analysis, and quackery. I love that word. He's the creator of contrailscience.com and metabunk.org. In 2018, he authored a book called Escaping the Rabbit Hole, which I have my autographed copy right here. Let me show you. There's my autograph. Bitches, take that. Let me get back here. So in April of 2019, he started a podcast called Tales from the Rabbit Hole, in which he interviews conspiracy culture guests. Pretty good. Check it out. He has made a plethora of media appearances as an expert analyst on chemtrails and UFO sightings. And I had the pleasure of meeting him for the first time, I believe in 2016 at SciCon in Las Vegas. So if that was wrong, he'll correct me, I'm sure. So please, everyone, welcome Mick West. What's up, buddy?
Yeah, thank you very much for that long introduction. Excellent. I'd forgotten half of that stuff.
Well, I had to look up your Wikipedia page and see what's going on. And first and foremost, before we get into anything else, I want to congratulate you, my fellow, on receiving your fellowship from...
Right back at you. Congratulations to you.
I know. I see yours right next to your head.
Yep, right there.
Right there. I got mine there. Boom, right there. So awesome.
Place.
Oh,
PSI fellow doesn't come with any money, unfortunately. So I still haven't got to the paid shill stage of debunking and skepticism yet. But it will come. It will come. I heard they say, do what you enjoy and the money will follow. And
that's what I'm doing.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it. But
I keep doing it. I mean, I love doing it. I love writing. I love investigating these things. And it's just, I think the thrill of the chase is really what gets me.
Yeah.
And just the thrill of the chase, and then finally solving a case is just, to me, it's just,
oh yeah,
it's so nice.
Yeah, yeah. For me, like, it's getting your teeth into something like that is yes. I'm a kind of, I guess, I have a good personality for debugging video games, which is being obsessive about details and figuring out exactly what went wrong when you're looking for a bug in the game, and that kind of transferred over to investigating all kinds of weird things. So I really like to figure out exactly what is going on, and when you actually get it, it's just it's a great feeling, because you can just, it's so done once you've done it.
Right.
Sometimes people, they try to explain things on the internet, and they throw out theories, or they say, oh, it's probably this, or it's probably that, or I think it's this, but they don't really know for sure, and they don't really do the hard work and kind of get down into the details and actually really figure it out. And I think that's where the true heart of debugging and skepticism actually is actually getting to the real bottom of things, rather than just throwing out possibilities.
Right. Yeah. I see that a lot, and I'm sure you do. I mean, with your background getting into, I mean, you took on chemtrails. That's the people that are in that category. Yeah, I'm sure. But
there's a range. There's a range of that. People I know, like friends of mine, believe in the theory to some degree, because they don't really know very much about it, and they don't really understand it. They just think that they've heard that the government is spraying things from somebody told them something,
right?
And then they look up and they see these white lines being left behind planes, and maybe they hadn't seen them for a few months and they hadn't really been paying attention before, and then they start thinking there's something to it, and then they see articles on things like weather modification, which is a real thing. That's a real thing that actually happens, and happens near here. They fly over the mountains and see the clouds. And then they put two and two together, and they think, oh, it's a real thing. Chemtrails are real. What's everybody worried about? It's just this thing that the government does. And they look up and see these lines in the sky, and they call them chemtrails. So just because someone believes in a theory, it doesn't mean that they're crazy or stupid. They're just kind of mistaken.
That's a good way to put it. And I think that what you mentioned there is that, like, people are crazy. They're not stupid for believing in something. And I think that's a stigma that we kind of get being skeptics, because I don't know about you, but that's one of the first defense mechanisms that I come across when we start talking about explaining things. It's I mean, you deal with that a lot.
Yeah, and it varies by what subject you're talking about. And I think some people are more touchy than others.
Right.
And I think probably the most touchy people get is when you're talking about a subject that they feel that they have personal experience of. Not just looking up and seeing lines in the sky, because that's just something everybody can see, but something that they've experienced that other people haven't. Like, they might think they've seen a UFO, or maybe they have seen a UFO. They've seen something flying in the sky that they couldn't identify. And then they see me as coming along and debunking UFOs, which they see as being an attack on their experience, like it's me calling them a liar. And I'm sure you get like a similar type of thing in paranormal investigations, where people who actually feel that they've had paranormal visitors or paranormal experiences, or they have psychic powers, they genuinely believe that these things have actually happened and they have witnessed a form of magic. And if they feel that you are pouring cold water on that, that can be seen as an attack. So you have to tread very carefully.
Right. So chemtrails, what's like, I've heard chemtrails, I know contrails. Can you explain to us what the difference is?
I can.
Please do.
In great depth. Well, do you know what a hydrocarbon is? Starting from the deep end here.
Okay. Let's just jump in. Go ahead.
Hydrocarbon, very simple, really. Hydrogen it's just hydrogen mixed with carbon. Okay. And oil is a hydrocarbon. It's mixed together in a certain molecular way. The molecules are all lined up and whatnot. But oil, gasoline, kerosene, jet fuel, they're all hydrocarbons. Candles, paraffin wax, made of hydrocarbons. They're made of hydrogen and carbon. And when you burn one of these, you're introducing a little bit of heat and some oxygen. So you've got hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Yeah, very simple chemistry, super simple. The carbon reacts with the oxygen and makes carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas. We all familiar with carbon dioxide. It's what happens when you breathe in and breathe out. You're making carbon dioxide. But the hydrogen in a hydrocarbon reacts with the oxygen to make H2O, hydrogen to oxide, which is water. So when you're burning a gallon of jet fuel, it seems really counterintuitive. But if you burn a gallon of jet fuel, you actually make 1.3 gallons of water and 4 gallons of carbon dioxide if you were to liquefy it, which is kind of a crazy thing to think of. Like, you take a gallon of gasoline and you burn it, and you end up with like a gallon and a half of water and 4 gallons of liquid CO2. But that's what actually happens. So whenever you burn something, it makes water. And you've seen this on a cold day. If you look at what's coming out of the back of your car, you see this condensation. This is water from the combustion of the hydrocarbon in your car. Same thing with a plane flying up in the sky. It's very, very cold at high altitude, and when you burn jet fuel at a high altitude, it usually makes enough water so that condenses out into a cloud. And really, all a contrail is, the white line that's left behind a plane, is just a type of cloud. It's just like any other cloud. It's actually physically almost identical to a regular cloud. And it does all the same things that clouds do. So sometimes you'll notice clouds, they just kind of pop up and disappear. Sometimes clouds spread out and cover the sky. Sometimes there's clouds here, but there's no clouds over there, or there's clouds with gaps, or there's clouds in rows. So you get all these things in contrails, but with contrails, you're only seeing this one little strip of cloud. So it lends itself to being easily confused, to having people making ideas about it that are incorrect. So people came up with the idea that they thought that a normal contrail should evaporate quickly because it's just condensation, like your breath. You breathe out on a cold day, your breath it makes a little cloud and that dissipates and vanishes. So they say that should happen with a contrail. And so they came up with this idea. And then they saw that some contrails actually lasted a long time. So they said the short trails are actually contrails, and then the long trails must be chemtrails, which is some kind of secret spraying plot. And then they came up with loads of ideas as to what these contrails would actually, these chemtrails would actually be. It varied from trying to poison people or spreading nanorobots. But the most common theory now is that they theorize that these long trails are being used to control the weather. Like with cloud seeding, is just control the weather. But they think it's on a much larger scale, that they're actually trying to control the world's climate. And they're trying to do something with global warming. And then again, you get a bifurcation in the theories. Some people think they're causing global warming with the contrails in order to perpetuate the big carbon tax hoax. And some people think that they're trying to stop global warming with the chemtrails so they can just keep on making money for a few more years until they can get enough to build a rocket ship and go to the moon. So there's a whole bunch of theories about them, but basically it's this idea that contrails are some kind of secret spraying thing.
So what's the reason behind the longer ones opposed to short ones? What causes them to last longer than the shorter ones?
It really just boils down to the humidity in the air. It's a little tricky to explain, but when a contrail is made, it happens in a very cold temperature, minus 40 degrees, which is pop science. Minus 40 degrees is the same in Fahrenheit and Celsius. It's the only temperature that's actually the same. So I don't have to specify which one it is. So minus 40 degrees, very, 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 very cold. Okay. You'd get frostbite instantly, very quickly in minus 40 degrees. So when you breathe out in minus 40 degrees, or if you have a jet engine or a car engine at minus 40 degrees, the water in the exhaust condenses and then it freezes. And this is the key difference between like the short trails and the long trails. If it condenses and then freezes, frozen water is a lot harder to kind of evaporate frozen water than it is to evaporate liquid water. So it stays there for longer. And in fact, it actually falls below a threshold at which it's actually persistent. And that threshold is a lot lower than for regular cloud formation. So you will often see contrails in the sky where there's no clouds, which is one of the things that confuses people, because contrails add water to that local bit of the sky, but everywhere else in the sky there's not enough water. But if there's enough, if it's above a threshold, even above that, then they will persist and they will spread, because there's enough water in the atmosphere to freeze more on the ice. There's not enough to make water clouds, but there's enough to make ice clouds. But you can't make an ice cloud without making a water cloud first, so that normal clouds don't form. So you can only make it by adding water, which is why you get contrails. So it gets complicated, and it's because it's complicated, people's brains shut down at a certain point, and it's a real challenge to explain to people. So you have to get someone who's actually really interested in the topic if they want to actually listen to what you're going to say.
Right. Wow. I mean, yeah, I can see. I mean, I do see that when I started. If somebody comes to me with a video or a problem and I start explaining it, but it gets into that detail, you can see them shut down. And they're like, oh, whatever, just tell me if it's real or not, know.
But my wife talks about there's a scene in Peanuts where the kids are in school and you have the teacher at the front of the class and the teacher's going wah 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 wah. Because what the teacher's saying is just noise to the kids. They don't care what they're saying, and that's how it turns into when you're trying to explain things to people. So you have to really tailor your explanation to who you're talking to. And I know you're a reasonably intelligent chap with some technical knowledge of various things. So you're not entirely opposed to getting a technical explanation. But then there's probably people in the audience who thought my explanation was boring or stupid. And then there's probably some other people who thought that it was not entirely correct because I skipped over a few details. So you've got to kind of tailor your explanation. And that's one of the big challenges of debunking and skepticism. It's not all about investigating. It's about explaining things to people afterwards. Like, why did this thing happen? And how can I help you understand why this thing happened?
Right. Yeah, that's always a challenge, because I know when I figure something out, it's like, okay, how do I transfer this? Because there is a lot of technical stuff, and you have to. I don't want to say dumb it down, but not everyone has the technical background, so they won't understand it. So you have to put it in simpler terms, and translating that is sometimes a challenge in itself.
And the best thing you can do is to use examples if you can, and you've got that capability with things like photos, ghost photos, like photos of orbs and things. You can quite often duplicate something that's similar, and then show people how it could have happened.
Right.
Or you can, if there's some kind of paranormal event in a house, like a door opening or something, then you can replicate it. So when you have the power to replicate things, that's almost always the best way of doing it, rather than just verbally telling them an explanation, like saying, oh, there's different air pressures in different parts of the house, and that makes doors close by themselves. That's just noise to people. But if you actually show somebody, if I open this window over here, then this door is going to close, then that's a practical demonstration of the theory, which is the best way of communicating it.
I absolutely love that. I that is my bread and butter. I mean, I love putting out the articles, but I would rather go to. I wouldn't rather. I love doing the articles, but I love going out to events and conferences of either side, like skeptical science or paranormal stuff, and being able to demonstrate stuff to them. Like when I saw you when you did your speaking engagement at SciCon, when you were up on the big stage and you did your what did you do? You were showing how
I had a lighter, I think.
Yes.
One here. Yeah, and
the microspheres.
Yeah, I was actually making microspheres, iron microspheres. So this iron microspheres thing, like I should probably explain what that is. Iron microspheres are is a lighter.
Oh,
burn some. So what I did was I got a magnet and I got a lighter, and I basically demonstrated how to make these very, very small iron spheres just on stage. It was a little bit of a cop out because they aren't exactly the same, but they're very, very similar. If whenever you strike the flint on a lighter, I took the gas out for the one I use on stage. The little sparks that you see are actually little pieces of. It's actually called ferrocerium. It's the thing that you call the flint is actually ferrocerium. It's not flint at all in the lighter, and it scrapes against the steel wheel, and the heat makes these sparks, and these sparks fly off, and there's bits of iron in them, and they melt, and they form these little iron balls, which are tiny little microscopic things, like a few microns across. And if you get a piece of paper and you hold a magnet behind it, and you get this and hold it in front of it, then you do this. It's a few times, you can get a bunch of iron microspheres. So that's just a practical, easily replicable demonstration. You've got to look at them with a microscope, of course, after that. But it's showing you something, even if it's only part of the experiment. The actual physical presence of something being done is a lot more memorable than just talking about something or even seeing a YouTube video. So if you're in person, carry around a lighter all the time. I said, I can make iron microspheres like this. Look, I just made 500 of them. Look, another 500.
And it was really nice. I mean, I totally agree with you. When you do a demonstration like that right in front of people, it makes a so much bigger impact. Because even after your talk, we sat down out in the lobby and we were talking a little bit, and you were sitting at the table, and I asked you to do it again, and you whipped it out. Yeah, boom, boom, right there. And we were able to see them, and took out my phone, used the phone camera to look at them. I'm like, this is really cool. It really hits at home. And I think most of the audience that watches, I think they're really into it. They love this technical stuff. They love the deep explanations. For one, I mean, they give up their Friday night to come out or sit in front of the computer and watch this. So, and I'm usually giving very detailed explanations when I can. So, and they keep coming back, and I always get positive feedback. So I have no doubt the people that are watching are into this. Oh, I have a question. I'm going to pop it up real quick. Bob says, Mick, do you have a degree in chemistry? There's a lot of chem knowledge.
I have an O level in chemistry, which is kind of like a high school diploma, or nearly a high school diploma. It's like a third of one, I guess, because it's only up to age 16. But no, chemistry comes up a lot. But the chemistry I talk about is very simple chemistry. It's a very simple level. You know what elements are. And you know what molecules are, you know what atoms are, and you know what compounds are, and you can mix things together. And I say mix very loosely. You can make compounds of things, and there's this, and things come up during investigations. Like, for example, in 9/11, people will talk about steel and iron, and you learn that, and most people know that steel is iron with added carbon, but having other things in it, and also having things done to them like heat treating and things like that. And that steel actually has a crystal structure inside of it, and if the crystal structure is a certain way, then the iron can break. And if you've ever seen Forged in Fire, you would pick up things like this as well. It's a good show.
It's a good show. Good show, yeah.
But yeah, you just pick up things as needed for investigations. So I started with a lot of stuff about condensation, like water, basically, like what happens, how do clouds form. And I have a large collection of books on clouds, which is up on my shelf here.
I do remember you posting, or you did a video, I think.
Yeah, like this one here is from, I think, 1904. And it's got like pictures in it of things that people post now. They will post pictures like this, and they'll say, well, look at those ripples in the sky. It must be some kind of scalar weapon or something like that. And I've actually taken books like this one. I think I should take this book and shown it to people. And it does help. Like, some people will look at a book like this and they'll say, oh yeah, they have things like that. And there's other pictures. These pictures are over 100 years old, like 120 years old. Right. Some of them are from the 1800s. From older books. I have older books that have pictures that are in this book as well. And knowing that exists in an old book, it's very difficult to argue with. So the physical presence of this book, you know, obviously this could be fake, but I've got 10 more books. Like here's what's this one called? The Principles of Aerography by Mick from the 1950s, I think. Yeah, it's an ancient book, and it's got clouds that people will look at today and say, look, chem clouds.
Yeah.
In all seriousness. And if you can show them all these old books that have these same clouds, it's that same thing, this actual practical thing, this solid, you know, these are real books. They're old. They smell like books. 100-year-old book smells like.
Yes.
So there's that physical tangibleness of the thing that is really, really, really useful.
It's not just a website or a YouTube video you're sending it to. This is literature that was printed, like you said, like 100 years ago.
And you know, I'd taken this collection of books many years ago, I think, like over 10 years ago now, and I made a video of it, of the collection. I went through each one, and I read what these books said about contrails. Now, they'd only started back in the 1940s because they didn't really write much about them before the war. But from the 1940s onwards, you've got 70 years worth of books that all talk about contrails and how they sometimes they're short and they dissipate quickly, and sometimes they last a long time. So giving people that historical context and the fact that there's so many different books and they all look different, you know, it would be a ridiculous endeavor to try to fake them. Now, of course, some people are going to think that they're fake, because there's a range of people, but you're not addressing, like, you know, the 0.05% that are just off the edge over here. Right. You're addressing the larger number in the middle, and the people who are just coming in have just heard of this theory, and you can show them these things and you can help them.
I like the comment from JD. Amazing, the government went back in time to plant those books to throw us off track.
Well, you jest, but some people actually think that. There are people in the chemtrail community and adjacent who think that time travel is real. I think there's one called Alfred Weber, who's one of the guys who co-authored a famous bill that got into the House. He gave it to Kucinich, I can't remember his name, congressman. Okay. And he actually thinks that the FBI or the CIA went forward in time from the 1960s and got a copy of his book and took it back to the 1960s to try to prevent the JFK assassination. It was some very convoluted theory. But he seems to, in all seriousness, actually believe that these things are real. These time travel is real, and that he has contact with aliens, and that there's this weird web of time and space that we exist in that is very malleable and not. Well, basically, magic exists essentially. Dennis Kucinich, that's the guy.
There you go. Thanks, Bob. Bob's got a question. When did the chemtrail theory come about, and why did it come about?
It came about in 1997 on Usenet, essentially. Usenet was essentially like a precursor to Facebook, kind of. You know, it's a bulletin board. People would chat on it, leave text messages for each other, kind of like, I don't know, kind of like long email lists, essentially.
Yeah.
But it was a bulletin board, and someone just came up with the theory and started talking about it and started promoting it. Then at first it was this very simplistic theory. The guy was obsessed with JP8 jet fuel, type of jet fuel that they were experimenting with, or might have been theoretical back then. And they thought that JP8 was toxic, and they looked up and saw these trails in the sky, and they thought, oh, that must be the JP8 doing that. So it's the JP8 guys got onto it, and they became obsessed with it. Then another guy, William Thomas, wrote a book and a series of articles, I think, about chemtrails, and I think it was called something like "Chemtrails Are Real." And it was basically just a bunch of urban legends, essentially, about chemtrails. Like, he was saying that the hospitals in England are overflowing with flu patients because of the toxic spraying from the clouds, and people believed it. and he actually he put things in his book, like he was flying along in his plane at minus 50 degrees, and he saw this trail and it shouldn't have been there or something. So he basically popularized it, and it kind of took off from there, and then it just kind of latched on to various points and of amplification after that. Like someone would do a documentary on YouTube eventually. Okay. And someone else would do a documentary, and different books would be published. There was a big documentary called "What in the World Are They Spraying?" By Michael J. Murphy, and that came out, I think, around 2008 or something like that. And then the media started getting interested in it, and that's the media gets interested in a topic like that, and they start making fun of it, but it just gets more people interested in it. It doesn't really help. Right. Having media attention, and that causes little spikes. But recently, nothing's really been happening in the chemtrail universe, and I think it's kind of fading away. It may well pop up again. But all these conspiracies, these old conspiracies like 9/11, JFK, obviously, and chemtrails, and things like the moon landing hoax, they're all kind of getting folded into kind of becoming this substrate of accepted conspiracies for people who are at a higher level,
right?
Like, which essentially is the people who are getting into QAnon now. They kind of have a background of being credulous, and so their main focus is on what's happening right now out in the world, but they all generally believe in something like chemtrails or 9/11 being an inside job, or they'll definitely think that JFK was assassinated. Although some of them think that JFK was actually replaced by a double and was spirited away to live in an island somewhere. Also, his son, JFK Jr., same thing happened with him. JFK Jr. is supposed to actually return and take over as the vice president after Trump wins this election, but it's not working out too well.
not looking good for that. Let's see. I got a question, a good question that actually goes into some of what you do and what your book is about. So John Michaels asks, when someone has bought hook, line, and sinker into chemtrails, what tactics do you use to get them to open their mind to other possible explanations?
Well, first of all, you've got to try to, the first thing is to
buy the book.
It gives you all the source material in there, and will give you the advice that I'm going to give you now. But the first step is to talk to them about anything. It doesn't matter what you talk about. In fact, it might be even best to just avoid the topic of contrails entirely. Just try to get a sense of what they're about in life apart from chemtrails. What are their actual priorities, and like what are their goals and things like that. I mean, you don't ask them that. You just chat to them and get a sense of them. You don't jump in and say, those are clouds. They're made of carbon dioxide and water, which they're not. But so talk to them, keep talking to them, get good communication with them. Then the next step is to try to figure out what they actually believe. Because if someone says they think there's something to this chemtrail theory, you have no idea really what they actually think, because there's all these different versions of it, and there's different levels of belief that people have, and different layers of complication. So just talk to them, ask them questions. Don't try to tell them stuff at first. Ask them questions and feel out what the lay of the land is, and what are the things that they think is evidence. And then if you come across something that is wrong, and you can show it's wrong, you can actually supply them with the information. But you've got to do it carefully. You've got to do it in kind of a non-threatening way. If they say something like contrails never persist, contrails always rapidly dissipate, then you can ask them to look at that video that I mentioned earlier. That's the one that's got all these books in, that has what the books say about contrails. And some people actually are swayed by that. I've heard many times of people who have actually watched the video, and they come away with questions. It doesn't mean it doesn't always work. They don't always come out of it completely, but it plants a seed. And that kind of leads me into not the last point, but like the point that you've got to, that overarches all of this, is that you're not going to get instant results. if someone is deep into a conspiracy theory, they probably have like a whole bunch of different things that they think is evidence for that conspiracy theory. And if they're fairly new to it, then they're probably still getting new things all the time. So you giving them some evidence of this one thing that is false, they've still got all this other stuff to look at. And then they don't entirely believe what you just said anyway. So it kind of just like gets swept away. But if you keep picking away at these things nicely, don't pick away in a nagging or a cruel way, but do it nicely, you will actually have an effect on the long term. Like you're constantly giving them more and more context about what's real, what the actual reality of the situation is. Like that these planes are actually just passenger planes. You can get your phone out, and there are these little augmented reality things which are free. Some of them are free, some of them are like $2, and you can look up at the sky with your phone, and it will tell you what that plane is. So if you see a plane that you think is spraying toxic chemicals, you think it's some kind of government tanker, you look it up and you see it's flight American Airlines like 157 or whatever, and that's the that debunks that one little thing. It takes this one little thing away from them. So you keep doing this. You keep giving them more and more context, and not just these little things as well. You can talk about broader things like how would this even work? What's the logistics of this setup, this chemtrail thing? Like, is there a central base where planes go and load up with chemicals, and do people see them fly to that place? Because surely the people nearby would be seeing these planes landing and taking off all the time. Or do they have trucks that somehow sneak it onto commercial jets? And how would that work? How would you get past the people who work at the airport? And how would they separate the chemtrail fuel from the non-chemtrail fuel? And what would be the point? Why are they even doing it anyway? Because the science of geoengineering, which you can talk about, is at a stage where we don't really know what would happen if we try to modify the weather, modify the climate in that way. We're essentially talking about the equivalent of setting off a couple of volcanoes, like super volcanoes, and spraying lots of stuff into the sky, which had terrible catastrophic effects in the past. There's a famous year in history, or the year without the sun, where it kind of stayed dark most of the day because a volcano had gone off, and crops failed around the world because there was so much crap in the air. So you got to be careful. So why would they be doing it? If the scientists don't know how to do it yet, why would you think they've been doing it for 40 years? So you can raise these broader questions and give broader context about the world, as well as focusing in on individual things, and just keep doing it. Don't give up, and don't lose your sense of humor and your sense of humanity, and just keep being a good friend to this person, and it will help.
I do like your approach, and I want to point this out on your book in the subtitle. You have it's called "Escaping the Rabbit Hole: How to Debunk Conspiracy Theories Using Facts, Logic, and Respect."
Yep.
Big deal. And I usually talk about this when like I do a podcast, and how do I approach people and stuff, and talk about not being a dick. You don't want to be disrespectful. You don't want to be confrontational, unless they're a psychic. Just kidding. Well, not really. But you want to be nice. You want to start a conversation. You want to talk to them. You want to talk with them, not at them. But I like that you put it in the subtitle of about being respectful. Because it's important.
It is, and I wanted to get that across to people so that they would know what the book was about. Like, the book isn't just about, look at these silly conspiracy theorists and here is 500 reasons why they are wrong. I mean, because that's just kind of a pointless book. Because if you want 500 reasons why they're wrong, you could just look it up on Google. It's kind of it's more like a structured way as to how to approach it, and with this material in there as well. And I also have interviews with people who were down the rabbit hole and got out, and their perspective on how they got out. And people making fun of them wasn't anything that helped any of them or anybody that I've ever talked to. And when people get out, there are people essentially get out by themselves, and your role in helping them is to help them get out themselves. It's not to pull them out. It's not to force them out by thrusting all these facts down their throats. It's to kind of give them a foundation upon which they can step and then get higher up out of this metaphorical rabbit hole. And to do that, you need to understand them, which means you need to respect them as people. That you've got to give them some respect that they are at least trying to understand, which most people are. Most people, they're trying to understand the world, and they are good people, which, you might think, oh, how could that possibly go wrong? But people try to understand, but then they get sucked down into a certain, what we call a crippled epistemology, where they've got like this set of information sources around them that is just feeding them nonsense all the time. And yet they think that this set of information sources is all true. So they've got an epistemology, a knowledge system around them that they think is true, because that's all that they know, all that they're familiar with right now, and they've got sucked into it. And your part of your job is just kind of to knock down the walls around that crippled epistemology garden, for want of a better word, and show them the outside world. And a lot of times that's the hardest thing, because they're so resistant to outside facts. You see, if you ever do like fact checking online, you send someone to a Snopes article, people who are into these other spheres of knowledge will laugh at Snopes, because they think Snopes is disinformation, when it's not. Like, 95% or more of the stuff on Snopes is great stuff. It's very well researched and very accurate. But they think that it's not, because they think that their information sources are correct, and your information sources are, whatever, fake news or disinformation or something to pablum for the masses. So you, as a friend, talking to somebody, sometimes you're the only link that they have to the real world. They've got this crippled epistemology in which their brains live, and you're on the outside. So if you can give them a little bit more information, it will expand their world, and every little helps.
Yeah, it does. I do like that. In reading this book, you give examples. You have talked to people that have come out of this rabbit hole, and it's fascinating to hear people's stories that are down there, and how they come out of it. And that leads into your podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, where you actually talk to people that were into these conspiracy theories, and you get their perspective and how they either dug themselves out, or because I correct me if I'm wrong, you've had people on that still are involved, but also out of them. And tell us about that.
Yeah, I have that kind of full spectrum of people on. Like, I have scientists and researchers on. Like, I had Elizabeth Loftus on once, the memory expert.
Oh my God, I love her.
David Keith, the geoengineering researcher. So I've had actual scientists, in part because their work intersects these conspiracy theories. Like, Elizabeth Loftus is an expert on memory, and a lot of conspiracy theories arrive because someone misremembers something, or they have an eyewitness account or something. And we know that eyewitness accounts are very unreliable, but that's hard to communicate to people. But anyway, you asked about the believers who are on, and the people who got out of the rabbit hole. I usually start by asking them what their origin story is, how they got into the rabbit hole, because I think that's a great way of starting any conversation, like with someone, regardless of where they are on their journey. Understanding how they started can be very important, because it gives you information, and it also helps them kind of go back and reflect upon why they actually got into it. But it's a nice innocuous question, like, hey, how did you get into this? How did you first hear about chemtrails or werewolves or whatever? And they will tell you. Usually they will tell you that they saw a video. Like, nowadays, almost invariably, they'll say that they saw some video that had some information that made them think, and then they started researching. And researching for them usually consists of more videos. So they will watch one, and then YouTube will suggest another, or they'll go looking for these other videos, and then they will just get kind of pulled further down and down the rabbit hole. And then, with the origin story, there's all the stuff that happens in there, of course. Like, I asked them about, did they talk to debunkers? And quite often some of them don't even know that debunking was a thing, or skepticism was a thing, or that there were all these resources that they could have looked at. Then I asked them about what the exit story was. And it's quite often, they get to a stage in their journey where there's kind of like enough pressure built up from them hearing things. And then it kind of pivots about one thing. They will hear one fact that they thought was false, they thought was true, and they now see is actually false. And they think, well, why did I believe this one thing for so long? Why did I actually think this was a fact? Like, if it's a flat earther, for example, they might think that ships come back over the horizon if you zoom in with your binoculars, and then they finally go to an ocean and look at it with their binoculars, and they find that it doesn't, and they realize that they were wrong all this time. There's various other examples, like the chemtrail thing. Like the one in the book, the classic example was this guy whose his entry story and his exit story were the same thing. It was this thing called ballast barrels, which are these big barrels of water. They look like beer barrels, and they're on a plane, and they've got all these tubes flying between them, laid out between them. And it looks like it's a plane set up to spray some kind of chemicals. And so people use this as evidence. But this guy, this sucked him into the theory. But then years later, someone took the time to actually explain to him what these ballast barrels actually were, and that they weren't actually chemical spraying barrels in planes for the purpose of chemtrails. And once he'd got the real explanation, and it had got through to him, just this one bit of it, then things start to unravel. Right. And I think this is a very common thing. You kind of think, you push people through a certain thing and they come out the other side. But it's more like you kind of build people up. They build themselves up to a certain kind of fragile position. And then it just takes a shift in perspective so they can see things in a certain way. And then they start looking at things and say, oh, this is wrong. If that's wrong, well, maybe I should check this out. I should do research on this. And then say, I'm going to research this. And then they look up the debunking sites, which they never looked up before. But now they realize that they can be wrong about things, or that the people that have been telling them things can be wrong about things. It allows them to look up these things and see what the alternative explanations are. And then it cascades. They see more and more things are wrong, and lots of them, the entire house of cards collapses, and they end up turning into skeptics, essentially. Not always, but it definitely does happen. Right. So, don't be disheartened if you don't see people's beliefs being diminished when you're explaining things. You're constantly giving people context, which is putting things into the structure, which will eventually collapse at a later date. But if you keep doing it, then it will allow them to be in that certain mindset, which will allow the whole house of cards to collapse, because they will be kind of primed to be to question things a little bit more than if you hadn't been there supplying them with this information.
I think one of the hardest things people have to accept for themselves is that they can be wrong. I think that's really it's a hurdle, because you get into these beliefs, and some people structure their entire lives around them, and to find out that you're wrong. To an example from what I'm used to is usually like ghost hunters that I interact with are so heavily invested in their beliefs, not only like spending a lot of their lives doing it, but financially they are really invested in a lot of this equipment. They spend thousands of dollars, and to be faced with something where they have a belief or a claim, and it's challenged and found out that they were wrong, it's a blow, because it's very hard to accept it, because they spent all this time, spent all this money, and now it's like, oh shit, I was wrong about that, and what else am I wrong about? And I've come across that a few times, where you almost sense like a despair in their voice.
Yes.
And it's disheartening, but
it is. But they'll get over it.
Yes,
I think it's the thing there. It's disappointing, but in a year later, they're going to be a new person and better for it. I mean, I guess you could argue it's sometimes you have to ask yourself, should I be disabusing this person of their beliefs if they get so much enjoyment out of it? If someone's some kind of casual ghost hunter or whatever, and they think they see sprites in the wood, should you just let them have their fun? Or is it actually a noble endeavor in any way to disabuse someone's fantasies if it's not causing any harm?
I usually don't. I mean, if I'm out in a crowd or an event, it's not like I'm actively overhearing conversations. And if I hear something wrong, it's like, oh, whoa, you're wrong. No, I usually wait until somebody actually approaches me and asks for an opinion, or right. Come on a show like this and ask for an opinion. And then, yes, certainly I'll give it. But yeah, that's a good question to ask ourselves. Is it worth it? But yeah, I mean, if they want knowledge, if they want to understand something better, and I have that knowledge to provide, then I most certainly will.
Yeah. Right. Honestly, a lot of times there is harm being done by these conspiracy theories. Like like you said, people. I don't know if people are spending money on things like cameras and whatnot. You can almost say like, what's the harm there? Like people looking at UFOs. People will spend lots of money on fancy long distance cameras and infrared cameras and things like that. But people do that anyway, regardless, to look at birds. So the fact that they're looking at UFOs doesn't really make any real difference. I think they're still taking photographs, which is fine. It's when people start doing things like making health decisions based on their conspiracy theories, like if they think that chemtrails are poisoning them and they have to buy some kind of chemtrail detox, which is a thing that InfoWars used to sell. I think called Chem Defender, and it has a little picture of a plane leaving contrails on it.
What was it? Any idea?
It was like vitamin C.
Oh.
A mixture of vitamins and something like, I don't know, like some herb of some sort, like witch hazel or something that you wouldn't think of. Probably some homeopathic remedies.
Yeah,
people waste their money on things like that, and then people don't vaccinate their children, and their children die, which is one of the more serious impacts. Or they don't vaccinate themselves, and then they catch COVID-19 and their grandparents die. So there are these real consequences of things in the health domain, which are very, very serious. And then like you see consequences like what we're seeing now in politics, with people spreading conspiracy theories, and a lot of that people can believe these conspiracy theories about politics very, very easily, because they have all these other conspiracy theories that they already believe. All these QAnon people, they believe in this complicated theory, but they also believe in 9/11, and a lot of them believe in chemtrails, and a lot of them some of them are flat earthers. Even I saw some flat earth guys demonstrating outside the Arizona Counting Center. So it's this whole kind of an ecosystem, and if you can kind of weed one area of the ecosystem, it helps in other areas as well. But if you just let everything just grow away, then it just provides this place where other things can take root, and leads to more serious problems in the future.
Do you find that's a trend per se, where if a person believes, say, in like the flat earther, but they will also believe in other conspiracy theories like 9/11 and other things? Is it like I guess if they believe one, do you find that they believe a lot more?
They usually believe more, but people usually have one conspiracy theory, which is both their favorite conspiracy theory and the most extreme thing that they believe. Like a chemtrail person will generally believe that 9/11 is an inside job, and they will believe that vaccines are bad for you, and they will believe that JFK was assassinated by the CIA. But they won't believe that the moon landing is fake. Well, some of them will, but then they become moon landing people who believe in it. So there's this kind of spectrum of conspiracies, like which get more and more extreme. You get the simplistic ones at one end, like Big Pharma faking their vaccine test results or something like that, and then really complicated ones like aliens actually being interdimensional visitors from outside the matrix who are trying to free us from enslavement from the lizard child eaters.
I love how you can say that
people believe.
I love how that string of words came out of your mouth and you had a straight face.
Well, there's so many super weird conspiracies. Like, are you familiar with the mud flood conspiracies?
Mud flood. I have not heard that.
Oh, look it up. It's pretty interesting. It's basically it's kind of an alternative history theory. I think how it happened is that some guy noticed that some buildings have windows that go below the sidewalk in some cities, and they couldn't figure out why this would be. And they thought that there must have been a big flood at some point. And there was a big flood, and all the buildings got covered in all this mud, and they had to build up the sidewalks. Okay. And that's why all these buildings have these windows below the wall. And they think that this big flood, this big mud flood, has been covered up for some reason. And it's been hidden from us. But if you look around, you see all these clues that this mud flood happened. You'll see things like these, like, you know, Seattle has a part of the city is underground. That could only have happened from a mud flood. You'll see, like, yeah, trees scoured away from a hillside and things like that. It's all part of this big mud flood that is being covered up. And the whole mud flood theory then ties into this entire convoluted alternative reality about what actually happened over the last 100 years and how history has been faked up to a certain point. There are some people that think things like the Middle Ages never existed, or certain things in history never existed. But then you get to people who think that, you know, the 1920s didn't exist, or that the 1920s were completely different to how we thought of them, or that the American Civil War never happened, things like that. So there's alternative histories. But it's the sheer ridiculousness of the evidence that they point to. Like, they will actually put photos up of a city street, and they show a building, and some of the windows go below the street. And yeah, it's a waste of time, but I actually look into some of these sometimes, and it's either because it was built on a hillside, so some of the windows naturally go to grade, or they have like kind of a basement with kind of like a lower level around, like, you know, you see in New York streets, you go down steps to the basement thing, and it's below the street level. Or the building was originally a higher up building, and then they came and they put a road in, and they built it up. Or they had to raise the buildings around because they had to put sewers in the street. So, you know, there are actually reasons for all these things, and it does feel like a waste of time looking into them, but it's kind of fun. And but what's most interesting is, why do people believe these things? You know, do they actually believe these things? It seems incredible when you look into things like that, or flat Earth, that anybody could actually believe it. You automatically assume that they're just joking when you first hear these things, or they're just, you know, playing some kind of game. But some people genuinely seem to actually believe these things.
That is fascinating. I part of the, I guess, investigation, or just a conversation, when someone brings up an idea, I love getting into that. I will just play the role. I don't want to say I play dumb, but I basically just don't try to debunk anything. If someone comes up with a theory that's kind of like this mud flood thing, I can't wait to look into this, because I haven't heard of it, and it sounds fascinating. But I will ask questions like, "Oh, tell me about this," because I want to hear why they believe it, how they got into it, because I do find that fascinating. Just the whole psychology of that behind why they believe it. It's amazing, and you go down that rabbit hole just with that, just figuring out why they like it. I want to put up a comment here. It's not a question, it's a comment from John, who says, "Mick, I just bought your book. I've been looking exactly for a book like this. I've got a few friends who seem to be stuck in logic traps that they can't escape involving conspiracy theories. Thank you." Awesome.
Thank you.
You got a couple.
Interesting. I'm interested what you mean by logic traps. What constitutes a logic trap?
John, please comment. Explain what you're talking about here.
And thank you, Henrik.
And we got who else? Oh, we got. I love this.
Thank you, Carl.
Got some fans. I love it. Let's see what else. Oh, we got a question. So we're gonna start moving away from chemtrails, contrails, and stuff, because people are starting to ask more like paranormal related questions.
All right.
So let's start getting into those. Audra, she's got a question about what do you think about the Mandela effect theories?
Well, the Mandela effect is this idea that there is some kind of parallel timeline that is intersecting with this timeline, and that we're seeing things from one timeline or the other, and so different people have different memories of the past. And like some people think that Nelson Mandela died in prison. Some people think that he didn't. He actually was released and became president, which he actually did. This essentially is basically human psychology, that people don't understand how memory works. Elizabeth Loftus would be a good person to talk about this. And they assume that their memories are correct. No one likes to think that their memories are wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's much more comforting to think that their memories are correct. It's much more reasonable, and it seems more correct for you as a person to think that your memories are correct. And so when you misremember something, like you remember the words of the song being a certain way, and then you look at the liner notes and it's actually something completely different, you think, what's more likely, that I misremembered this, or that an alternate timeline has whisked in and changed all the liner notes of all these songs into these new lyrics, but my memory remains because it's from the alternate timeline, or I'm from the alternate timeline, or they are. And that explanation sounds more convincing for some reason than just being misremembering. But it gets even more convincing because you see more and more examples of these things. And the classic one, I think, is the Nelson Mandela, of course. But then there's the Berenstain Bears,
yes,
which I'm not familiar with, but apparently a very popular kids' book.
Yes,
people remember it as being the Bernstein Bears or the Bernstein Bears.
Bernstein,
so
yes.
They have different pronunciations and different spellings of it, and they think that's how it was, but now it's not that way. So how could that be? It was like that, now it's not. Obviously, their memory is correct. And then people actually find things like they'll find toy Bernstein Bears, and it actually has the different spelling on it, because people making the toys have made this obvious mistake in spelling or pronunciation or whatever. And so they start gathering this evidence, which mostly consists of them misremembering things, other people misremembering things, and then other people misremembering things, and then reading about that, and then going back and thinking, oh yeah, that sounds true. I remember it being that way as well. Mm-hmm. Like, what did Darth Vader say to Luke before he chopped his hand off? Yeah, it's like there's websites set up who say, like, there's 20 movie lines that you misremember, and that's all it is. It's just you misremembering things. But then people misremember the same things. The whole Luke, I am your father misremembering things. Everybody has the same thing, and millions of people have that same misremembrance of that thing. And so if all these people misremember it, then someone has the idea that that could actually be a thing. And the reason is not just that it's a natural slip of the brain, it's a slip of time and alternate dimensions slipping into our reality. But it's not, it's just your memory.
It seems to be a popular theme in some time traveling movies and or TV shows, where somebody goes back, changes something, comes back to the present, and then they have this memory of an alternate timeline, and everyone else is wrong.
How does that even work, though?
It can't work.
Magic.
We're gonna dive into some ghost stuff here. So Moon Joey, which is an awesome name, their question is, one of the more popular beliefs paranormal beliefs is that cold spots are indicative of spirit presence. A main argument against this hypothesis is that it violates the second law of thermodynamics and entropy. I would love to hear
see why it would, though. Can you explain why, Moon Joey? Why does it violate the second law of thermodynamics and entropy?
There you go. We'll come back to that.
I guess we should say what they are. The second law of thermodynamics, I believe, is entropy always increases. I also get the wrong order. You should look it up real quick.
Law of thermodynamics. Let's look it up. This is part of the show. So I mean, sometimes I'm
fact checking in real time here.
We are fact checking. Let's see. Second law of thermodynamics says that entropy of an isolated system always increases. Isolated systems spontaneously evolve towards thermal equilibrium, the state of maximum entropy of a system. More simply put, the entropy of the universe only increases and never decreases.
So entropy is essentially disorder. So and the universal level is essentially things cooling down. All the heat of the universe is settling down into a flat line. But the definition of entropy is the second law of thermodynamics is that entropy decreases in a closed system, and we're not in a closed system, so it's completely irrelevant.
Right. Okay.
So it doesn't mean anything, and people bring it up all the time and say this violates the second law of thermodynamics. But we're not in a closed system. We're on a planet that's being bombarded by the sun. And you could argue that the universe itself is a closed system. But unless you're living in a thermos flask, or you're living in some kind of NASA capsule that's isolating you from the rest of the world, you're not in a closed system. So cold spots existing doesn't violate anything. It just means that this is a differential in heat for some reason.
Yeah. And we
if you ascribe that reason to ghosts, I think you've got more issues than simply saying it violates the second law of thermodynamics. Because if you're positing that ghosts could do anything, then you kind of have to explain, how are these ghosts doing something? But no, they don't really violate the second law of thermodynamics if they have something. Apparently ghosts have some kind of power. They have some kind of energy, and if they don't, then they don't exist. So you could argue that, but it's kind of almost like you're arguing by semantics at that point, which isn't really a very useful argument. I mean, the real issue with ghosts is, do they exist? Not is it possible for them to exist? You can make a fairly convincing argument from physics that nothing could exist without some kind of energy substrate that we know of, some way of containing the energy, some way of storing energy locally so it can be expended in some kind of intelligent way. So you need that. But what's been posited with ghosts is that there's a yet unknown or yet unexplained mechanism for doing that. And so you can't say, oh, that's impossible, because the answer then is, oh, we just haven't discovered what the actual mechanism is yet. Right. So no.
And I mean, with that, I would also say that there's a lot of more simpler explanations for the alleged cold spots. Oftentimes people don't bother to look at windows that are open, like a crack, or especially in older places that you're talking like 100 years old or give or take, where there's gaps between windows and gaps between door frames where you can get drafts.
Or if the floor, like I have a hardwood floor, and there's a few little gaps where I think air comes in through we have a raised foundation. Like if you have any kind of crawl space or raised foundation, then that's in the summer will be colder than the rest of the house. And cold air doesn't rise, but a draft differential in air pressure can bring that through. So obviously there's lots of other reasons, but I don't think that's what he was asking there. Is there a physical way of proving that this isn't from a ghost? And no, there isn't really, because there could be a ghost doing it by some method that we do not understand.
Right. So Carol asks a question: as a National Park Service interpretive ranger I'm not sure what that is. We're told people are more open to new ideas when in the national parks. Are there other places, situations where people are more open-minded?
Interesting. Well, probably in the pub, having a few drinks, or
anytime you come to my house.
Yeah, I think an interpretive ranger is someone who basically takes you around the park and tells you something about the history and tells you what the trees are and the nature and things, and then discusses the plans for the national park and the history and whatnot. Very good job. Very something that's cool. Needed, I think. But it's essentially they're acting as teachers, and when people are in national parks, I don't think they become more open-minded because they're in a mystical space of being in a national park. They are just usually genuinely interested in what's there, because there's usually something like going on, like there's a Native American history component to them, and then there's the geology of the park, and then there's the nature of the park, and then the issues of conservancy, and then land management and things like that. And these are anybody who visits a national park and takes the time to sign up for a tour with an interpretive ranger is going to be the type of person who's interested in that type of thing. So it might be a little bit of a selection bias there, and that you're just seeing people who are really interested in new ideas and hearing things. People might be more open-minded about conservation, but I don't think if you picked a random person from the Yosemite parking lot, that they would necessarily be any more open-minded than someone from the Costco parking lot.
All right. Carol also follows up with another question. Isn't this conspiracy culture an indictment on our education system?
No. I don't think so. I think it's possible we could do better, but unless you almost have to structure the educational system around preventing people from getting tricked into these things. There's an interesting couple of documentaries on TV at the moment. One is called The Vow, and the other one is called Seduced, and they're both about the NXIVM cult. And the leader of the NXIVM cult was recently just sentenced to 190 years in prison. And he ran this cult where basically he recruited people into this kind of self-help pyramid scheme, and they had to recruit other people, and then it became this complicated sex cult where people were brought in as sex slaves and branded and things like that. But he deliberately targeted people who were very successful in life, usually very well educated, and usually quite well off. So they were actually the best products of our educational system, and they quite often had advanced degrees in things, and there were doctors, actual MDs, who fell for this cult. It's education in terms of like being better, educating in the traditional sense, I don't think is failing us there. I'm sure there's more. If people are less intelligent, they're usually more likely to go for conspiracy theories. But you get all these people who are very, very intelligent, people even with PhDs, who fall for these conspiracy theories. So, perhaps I might modify my answer from no to yes, and say that perhaps we need to be more specific in addressing conspiracy theories and disinformation as a topic in itself, and not simply educating people better in general. It needs to be an extra specific course that we have in schools, critical thinking.
I totally agree with that. I've been preaching that a little bit, in circles, that I think critical thinking should be taught at a young age. Get them while they're young. And
they do that. They do it at a lot of schools, actually. I have several teachers who are friends of mine, and they talk about they do actually do these things, and there are classes on disinformation.
I recently talked to a teacher, and I actually helped with both a lesson plan, and I did a video where the kids were able to ask me questions about different topics, and the class was about critical thinking, and she uses paranormal topics to keep their interest.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like formal critical thinking is something I have a mixed feelings about it. I have mixed feelings about it. It's like something I personally don't feel that I actually do. Personally, like I don't think I do this type of critical thinking that would be taught in schools. I feel like I have a propensity for digging down and looking for explanations, and I'm very familiar with the subject matter now, so that allows me to talk about it, and I can figure stuff out. But then I see, like, within the skeptical movement, people talk about fallacies, like all these logical fallacies. I actually had a little argument with Stephen Novella about this a few years ago. Like, the idea that learning fallacies is useful. I'm not entirely sure about it. Is it actually useful to be able to point out a fallacy? It's kind of useful, like with skeptics discussing things amongst themselves. You can say, "Oh yeah, that is the ego propter po hoc fallacy," which I don't even know what that is because I don't really know half the fallacies.
Ergo propter hoc, yeah.
And on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, they often do like, "What's that fallacy thing?"
Right.
And I think like Jay Novella like said once, "Is that non sequitur?" And Steve was like, "Jay, all fallacies are non sequitur." Because that's all a fallacy is. It's non sequitur means does not follow. And that's all a fallacy is. It just, that does not follow from what came before, but in various different ways. And you can identify these different ways. And if they teach all these ways in school, I was never taught all these ways. I don't know most of the fallacies. I know straw man. I know ad hominem. I know, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. And yet I can debunk things very well, and I can communicate things with people. But would I be better at doing it if I knew all the fallacies and I could spot fallacies? I don't know. I'm not sure if it's a particularly useful thing. So I'm not sure how you would teach critical thinking in a way that's useful. Perhaps if there's somebody who's been on a critical thinking course and then later in life found it to be useful or felt that it stopped them getting into a rabbit hole, that would be a good person to talk to. Drop me a line.
I understand where you're coming from, because I've been asked a couple times to give information or to, hey, why don't you teach something on critical thinking? Like, how do you do it? And for me, it's difficult to actually explain how I employ it. Like, I know what it's supposed to be, but I get it. I guess I'm the same way as what you're explaining. I know how to figure things out. And
and if you look up critical thinking and look up a definition of critical thinking and then look up courses in critical thinking, they're all different. There are all these different definitions of critical thinking. It's like, some people define it as using your faculties to consider problems. It's like, what? It's just like demanding evidence. It's an obvious thing. Checking sources.
The definition
there's no rules of thumb. You say the definition, but where are you getting this definition from?
Let's see. Defining critical thinking from the Foundation for Critical Thinking.
Oh, they would know. They would know.
I mean, they're a whole foundation. So this actually goes into, get out of the way. I hate the pop-up ads to come up. Critical thinking is a rich concept that has been developing through this blah, blah, blah. Oh, wow. This is really long-winded.
So there you go. It's like someone says, like, learn critical thinking. Oh, I'll look it up on the internet. And they're like, what the heck is that?
All right. So it says critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to a belief and matter divisions, clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reasons, depth, breadth, and fairness.
That's great. You just do that, whatever. Yeah. I'm not sure. Like someone comes to you with a problem, like, and say, my friend is, he believes in chemtrails, and then you said, well, just teach him some critical thinking. That'll help. And then he goes and he looks up, and this is the definition, and the definition is basically being a genius. If you could just simply be way, way more intelligent than you are now, and super disciplined in the way you think, and thinking in a certain way that is laid out here in words you don't actually understand,
Maybe it's more like for me, I guess some of the things that come up, and I do try to, in some of the lectures that I've done, I do try to go through steps that I take. I try to narrow it down into some steps, like attention to detail, what to look for, kind of how to tell a good resource from a bad resource, and stuff like that. So, yeah, critical thinking. You're right. There's several definitions. This long-winded one that I went out, I would never use, because I think I would get to the second line and people would just be bored and walk away from it. But
yeah, I mean, I try to define it as simply as possible. Critical thinking is essentially it's the first word is critical, which is kind of like criticism, and is that you want to find flaws in what's being presented to you. So you're critiquing what is coming in. So you're saying, what is the evidence behind this thing, and you're looking to see what is the quality of this evidence, and who does it come from, and does this person have a good record with this type of thing, and are there other people? Are there more than one source of information here? But there's these other stuff about using your faculties and like applying rigor and logic and things like that. Those are things that you can't just tell someone to do that. You can't just say, use logic more. You can tell them to check your sources. These are just like very simple rules of thumb that you can give people. But to be intellectually rigorous requires years and years of practice in being intellectually rigorous. Like, I think I'm intellectually rigorous to some degree, but I probably have huge blind spots because most of my stuff is very ad hoc, and it's just doing certain things that I find interesting. So I'm good at doing those things, but I'm terrible at doing other things. But to fulfill that description you just read there, you'd have to be some kind of university professor and expert engineer and philosophy major and some kind of, I don't know, relationship counselor all rolled into one. So teach critical thinking in schools is a good thing, but I think we need to focus on very practical aspects of critical thinking.
I agree. I would rather do, instead of, I don't know how to say it right, because I don't want to say just teach a class, as in like just stand up there and talk. I would have like a practical workshop where here's a mystery, let's dig into it, and just go through the steps. Let's take a brand new mystery and just let's attack it, and everybody come along with me. We'll do it, but I'm not going to do everything for you. I'm going to offer suggestions, and then look for suggestions. We'll talk about it, and start doing our research and where to look.
And you give people these little things they can do. These little heuristics. A heuristic is basically a made up method, in a way, just a method that works, like a rule of thumb or a practice that people have found to be useful. A heuristic, and you give them to people, and then you demonstrate them working. With examples, like I'm sure you've done things like with photography, you've done various things that you can, look at the EXIF data, things like that. Just something you should always do. Or, can you see motion blur? And if you see one light with a little path around it, see if there's other lights with a little path around it. Little tips like that. Things like that, which are, you're not teaching people critical thinking. You're teaching them useful skills and little things that they can actually use, practical things,
practical stuff. And this comes with experience. That a lot of the stuff, that came with years of experience, just looking at photos and thousands of photos and realizing, okay, I'm reading books and manuals and understanding, learning. So I totally get it. Let's see. I have a couple questions here. We got about a half hour to go, which is nice. Let's see. Coral says, have you ever strangled someone in your mind while interviewing them on your podcast? And if so, or does your chill nature extend to all? Also, do you have plans for another book anytime soon? Wow, you are a very chill person.
Yeah, I guess I get a little frustrated sometimes, but usually if someone is being particularly obstinate, it's just more interesting, and I just try to kind of drill down and just focus, and you got to remain calm to do that. And I do have plans for another book sometime, but not soon. I'm thinking of doing 2 books, one which will possibly be a sequel to this book, building upon it, and then another one which I'm thinking of doing a book on the science of conspiracy theories, like the various aspects of science and kind of how science can be, how conspiracy theories can be used as a teaching tool, because there's so many things I've learned from conspiracy theories that it's like an interesting way of presenting science to people.
All right. I look forward to those. Another question. Oh, wow. You got to put words in here. I'm not going to even try to say.
Yeah.
Question from John. Besides being simply true, what separates a conspiracy like the Dreyfus Affair and Tuskegee syphilis trials that actually happened, and something like the 9/11 conspiracies and chemtrails?
Well, I mean, that's one is a theory, and the other one is something that's accepted reality. So the 9/11 conspiracies and chemtrails are theoretical, and they have proposed evidence which has almost invariably been debunked. So there's nothing really outstanding that's there. The Dreyfus Affair and the Tuskegee syphilis trials are just a history. They're things that happened. Now, before they happened, you could say this was a conspiracy theory that came true. Now, the Dreyfus Affair was this French soldier was framed in the press, I think, and Emile Zola came to his rescue, and there was this big brouhaha in France about it. Before it was settled in court or wherever, there was probably 2 sides to the argument. So you could argue that that was a conspiracy theory then, but it's now settled. But like then, the Dreyfus Affair, I think, was probably something that was a very polarizing thing in France. And so it's kind of like this just big argument, and one side's trying to defend something and the other side is trying to attack it, and it's this big public thing, and then eventually the facts come out, and then everybody saw what really happened. But that's not really what happens with conspiracy theories. They are usually very minority things, and they're usually very uncomporting with reality. They don't really fit with what's actually going on when you look into them. Yeah, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment is something you could very easily imagine happening. Like doctors injecting people with syphilis, injecting African Americans with syphilis to study them and then lying to them. That's something that seems very plausible now. And probably would have done back then to the people then if they'd understood what was going on. If they had the information, there's a big dearth of information back then, obviously. But yeah, there's this constant question of like, what are these conspiracy theories that came true? But they weren't really conspiracy theories back then. They were bad things that happened that were revealed. And right now we have bad things that have been theorized that have not been revealed and probably never will be. So I think they're kind of 2 different things.
All right, so we're winding up, and I know nobody asked about it, but I'm going to ask about it because you are an expert on UFO videos. So I would love to hear, I guess, basically a summary, if you can, of a summary of what the 3 recently famous UFO videos, the FLIR or the Tic Tac, the Gimbal, and the Go Fast videos, because I've been asked them countless times on the show in the past. There's a few UFO enthusiasts that come on and ask about them. So if you could, I don't want to take all of your time for this, but
I'll do my whistle stop version of it. Well, the FLIR incident is it's a video, but it actually started with like a sighting of what was described as a Tic Tac, like a little kind of Tic Tac shape with legs, and this pilot said that he was flying through the air, and he was vectored to this position in space. And they got all concerned about it. They didn't know what was going on, and they got there and they saw what looked like a tic tac, and it was described as being tic tac shaped, with like little legs coming out from underneath it. And they said it made these strange movements, and that they couldn't follow it, and it was going really, really fast, and then it flew off into the distance. This was preceded by radar sightings and stuff. There's a much more complicated version of the story. But then another pilot goes out, and when he gets there, there's no tic tac. There's no tic tac to be seen, and but he gets a ping on his radar, and he points his camera in a certain direction, and the camera picks something up. Now, these cameras are very, very, very powerful. They have like these 100 times zoom on them. So they're picking up things which are like 20 miles away, or more than that, 40 miles away. And if you just point your camera in the direction, you might get something that's up way off in the distance. The FLIR 1 video, if you look at it, it just looks like a little black blob. You can't really see anything there at all. It doesn't look like a white tic tac. It's not making any sudden moves. And I did some analysis showing that it wasn't making any sudden moves. And at the end of the video, it looks like it flies off really fast, but really it's just the camera moving. Like if I was to move my camera, it looked like I've just moved off to the side, but I haven't. It's just the camera moving. I did a lot of work on these videos, and I have a whole YouTube channel, YouTube playlist of all the videos that I did explaining what I think they are. So if you want to see more detail, you can go there. But I think what that video probably was a distant plane. And I think it's consistent with that if you analyze it. People claim that it's moving in the video, but I think it's actually just the camera movement. And the thing is, it doesn't seem anything at all like this tic tac that the guy saw earlier, because he claimed it was like moving really, really fast from one side to the other and zigzagging and then flying away. But it doesn't actually do this in the video. Nothing actually happens. It's like the most boring video of a UFO you can imagine. It's a little tiny little fuzzy speck, and it's very low resolution. So I think people there are kind of conflating this rather boring video with these other events that happened at the same time, like this guy seeing the tic tac and the radar events, and other people claiming they've seen things. So the video itself possibly is an alien spaceship or a super fast Russian anti-gravity machine far off in the distance. But the most likely thing, based on the video itself, is that it's just a plane. But people like to say that, you know, I'm ignoring all these other things. But the thing is, there's nothing that actually links one thing to the other. So if you just look at the video, if you just analyze the video, then it's probably a plane. That's the FLIR 1 video, and that happened back in 2006, I think, or maybe 2004. Then there's two other videos, Go Fast and Gimbal, which happened at the same time, and it was on the same flight, same pilot, but two separate events within the same flight.
Oh, I did not know that part.
Yeah, the first one is Go Fast. Actually, I'm not sure which order they came in chronologically, but Go Fast looks like it shows the camera's looking down. You can see the surface of the ocean. Then it looks like something flies in really rapidly. The guy moves the camera around, trying to catch it. He has to go back and forth a few times. Eventually, it locks on to this thing and starts tracking it. So it looks like it's moving very, very fast over the surface of the water. And so that's how they describe it. They say it's moving at 2/3 the speed of sound over the speed over the water, and it shows up as cold in infrared, which means that it's got no heat source, no engines or anything like that. So it's moving impossibly fast and it's cold. So it must be some kind of weird technology, possibly alien. But on the screen of the Go Fast video, they actually show the range to the object and the angle down to the object. So you can actually use those two things and the height of the plane to figure out how high the object is above the water. And it turns out it's not actually at water level. It's actually halfway, almost exactly halfway between the plane and the water. So because it's in the middle, when the plane moves past it, with the camera constantly focused on it, then the camera sees the water whiz by, and it looks like the object is moving over the water, when really it's just the plane moving past the object, and the view changes due to parallax. And this is something that the math in it, and it is very, very simple and straightforward. Like if I was to take my my little Tic Tac UFO here, and actually I could do it with this camera setup, but it's like if you fly around it like this, my head's moving relative to the object. But from my perspective, it kind of looks like this object is moving across my computer screen.
Right. I think you did. Didn't you do a video out by your pool?
Yeah, I do. I have a series of videos where I demonstrate this, and one of the best ones I did was I put my iPhone on a gimbal and had it tracking the object, and so I was up on a ladder looking down at this Tic Tac actually that I had, and if you look down from above and just move around, and then you play back that video and stabilize the object, which is how it actually happens with the in the video itself, because it's tracking it very exactly using these little gimbal mounted mirrors that it has inside the camera, so it's perfectly always in the middle of the image. It really looks like the object is moving when it's not moving at all. So then I show that video, then I do another video simultaneous of the same shot with a different camera from the side, showing me doing this, dangling it over the pool. And I actually had to replicate this a few weeks ago for some TV show that's coming out sometime next year.
Nice.
It's top secret. Can't tell you about it though.
Okay.
So yeah, that's something that is explained in the sense that it's not moving very fast over the water, so it's not quite so amazing. And you can do a calculation of the speed, and it turns out to be just basically probably just drifting in the wind.
Okay.
Probably not moving at all, maybe moving slightly. So it's either something like a balloon, which is the most likely explanation, because weather balloons have radar reflectors and they get tracked, or it could possibly be like a large, well-insulated bird. I think that's fairly unlikely, but it's a possibility, and I wouldn't like to take it off the list. But the most likely thing is a balloon. And then finally, everyone's favorite is the gimbal video. Now, the gimbal video looks like a flying saucer, which I think makes it much more compelling to everybody. So you see this thing it looks like it's flying along. Let's see, why do I have the saucer shaped on here?
I love the props.
Vaguely saucer shaped. Okay. So it kind of looks like it's flying along like this. So the camera, it doesn't actually do this. It's in the middle of the screen. So again, you've got this parallax effect. So it's you can't tell how much it is moving and how much is the camera moving. So it looks like it's flying along like this. And then it kind of it does like a little twitch like that, and it does like this big turn, and it's like, how is that even possible? And it ends up like straight up and down like this, and it appears to stop. I think what's really happening there is a combination of two things. So the first one is parallax, again, just like the other thing. The way the jet is actually banking around, it's coming up behind this object. So at first it's flying past it, and then it's flying towards it. So it looks like it's slowing down when really it's not changing speed at all. It's just the relative motion of the jet and the angle of the camera, which is something that it's very difficult to wrap your head around, because these super zoom cameras that are super stabilized and super good at tracking things are not something you see in everyday life. Mm-hmm. So it was quite challenging to get a camera set up where I could actually replicate it. But then the other thing is that what's this saucer shaped thing, and why is it rotating? And I think what it actually is a glare, because it's actually infrared. And I think it's actually looking at a jet that is flying away. So you're essentially looking up the tailpipe of the jet. So you're looking at the very hottest part of it in infrared. So it's looking at a very bright light, like a flashlight. Yeah, flashlights. They go in one direction, but when it's going straight towards you, it's going to be a lot brighter than when it's over there.
Right.
And if you take a flashlight and you strap it to a plane, like I have done here for some reason, and then you turn on the engines pointing at this infrared camera in simulated mode, then you've got this very bright glare, and you can't see the plane anymore. It's hidden behind this glare. Mm-hmm. And it becomes even more dramatic when it's further away. You can probably see the wings poking out earlier, but as they get further and further away, the glare stays a similar size, but the plane is getting smaller. If you want to go very close, you can see the wings on either side of the glare.
Yeah. Okay.
But further back, you're just seeing the glare. If I get pointed out the camera, so the plane's only this big.
Very cool.
The glare is this big. And the glare, you can see here, this glare has little spikes on it, and I can't really tell with this one, but like it's actually a little bit longer in the horizontal than it is in the vertical. But the shape of a glare is defined by things in the camera and the surface of the camera. So if the camera is cleaned in a certain way, it's like you swipe the front of the camera,
right?
It can make the glare be shaped more in one direction than the other. And so if the camera rotates, then the glare is going to rotate relative to the horizon.
Right.
And the way these cameras are set up, very complicated. Don't really have enough time to explain it, but the way they're set up is they're on 2 gimbals, and you actually need 3 gimbals to track things correctly. So for it to track something, it needs to actually rotate whilst it's tracking, which means the image will rotate, which means it needs to derotate that image internally so that it remains the same way up. And then you get this thing called gimbal lock, where you can't traverse the forward direction if you are looking down. I can't really demonstrate it with my hand, but I have videos demonstrating it. So when it traverses 0 degrees, at some point, the coarse outer gimbals, because it has inner gimbals and outer gimbals, again, it gets a little complicated. The coarse outer gimbals have to go from this orientation to this orientation. So it has to do this big rotation to get past this gimbal lock in the middle. And that makes the glare rotate, but it doesn't make the horizon rotate because the glare is caused by the camera rotating, and the horizon does rotate, but it gets rotated back by the derotation mechanism. It's almost impossible to explain in a few minutes. Like you can give me like half an hour and a bunch of props, I can demonstrate it, which is why I had to make all these videos, and why so many people think that I'm full of crap, because they don't take the time to understand what the argument actually is. Even the people who are really interested in the topic, like Commander David Fravor, who is the pilot who saw the Tic Tac. He was asked about my analysis on the Lex Fridman show, and he basically just went, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I've been a pilot for 15 years. His accent was a lot nicer than that one. But he basically didn't actually listen to my arguments, so he couldn't really have rebutted them anyway. And I understand that. They're a little complicated, and if you think I'm an idiot, why would you spend time doing it? So it's a challenge.
You did a great job. I watched the videos, and it was just, I love it. I loved it because of the detail that you went into and being able to recreate so many things. I love that kind of shit. So
yeah, it's fun. It's
awesome.
And I got to build my little UFO model.
Everybody loves it. Lots of comments that came by. That cracked me up when it came down. I love that. Did you set this all up for them?
Yes, I have a little. It's like rigged up on my bookcase here with a big clamp.
Oh, look at that! Wow, that's cool. Behind the scenes, I love it.
Yes.
So, a couple more questions. We're winding down. We got about 15 minutes. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe you have a better idea. So Hendrik says, my question relates to David Fravor and TTSA. Are these people engaging in some kind of highly unethical guerrilla marketing campaign for modern UFO lore-related products?
I wouldn't say it's highly unethical. It seems fairly ordinary. They're just basically marketing things. And I think to a large extent, the people involved in TTSA, this is Tom DeLonge's organization, the To the Stars Academy, they actually believe that there are UFOs out there, and they believe that David Fravor saw a UFO. But I've heard lots of people say that David Fravor is lying, which I always tend not to think that. I prefer to think that they just made a mistake rather than that they're lying. The marketing stuff, I think they shy away from genuine analysis, and they have a Discovery Channel show. Let's move this UFO. It's kind of distracting. Yeah, they have a Discovery Channel show, and it's the usual standard of that type of show, and it's just a bunch of credulous people and pseudo experts who really aren't experts at all being brought in to go, well, I don't know what the heck that thing is. Look how fast it's moving, but they don't actually really do any analysis. They just render their opinion. Oh, well, I've been a fighter pilot for 15 years. No, I've never seen anything like that. So, guess it must be aliens. Nobody actually talked like that. It's a caricature of that type of thing. They were lovely people on the show. Sorry if I'm making fun of them. But yes, I don't think it's unethical, particularly more than normal.
Yeah, it seems just standard.
And any show on those channels, Discovery, Geography Channel, and
History.
History Channel. Yeah, they're all kind of not all. There's some that are better than others, but a lot of them are they're entertainment shows, and most people know that. The producers certainly know that. I know there was one show in particular that was on. I can't remember which one it was, so I'm not going to hazard a guess. Where somebody told me that the showrunner for this particular show completely disbelieved everything that was in the show, and he was just basically not making it up, but just trying to present a cool story. But they know that that they're putting look at this amazing photograph of something in a lake, and it's something that was debunked 3 years ago or something, and it's kind of disheartening that that's what TV has become. But people like the fun drip of stuff, so that's what sells.
I hear you. Another question from Yozun. Wow, that's a new one. Are ghost hunters also conspiracy theorists? Do they believe there is a conspiracy by science to suppress the truth of the soul, spirit, etc.?
It's an interesting question because, if you think about it, they kind of have to be, because how could all these scientists not know this reality? If psychic powers and stuff are so common that they're happening all the time, how could science be denying it? There would have to be a conspiracy, but then how would that work?
Yes.
So it's kind of like any kind of weird belief. Like the UFO people, you might not think of UFOs as being a conspiracy, but it very much is so, because they all talk about disclosure and when is the government going to admit that UFOs are a real thing. So that they all think that the government is covering something up, even if it's just that they don't know what these flying objects are, but they think there's some kind of conspiracy going on to cover things up. So yeah, I would say they are a kind of conspiracy theorist, even if they don't really realize it.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, where it's science doesn't know everything. Science they don't want to test it. I hear that a lot. Scientists don't want to bother seeing if ghosts are real or if psychics are real. Yet I've seen
that would challenge the fundamental underpinnings of how we understand the universe, which would be the best thing ever for science.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what scientists want to do. They want to discover new stuff. If there was some kind of evidence of life after death, or evidence of psychic powers, or evidence of ethereal beings doing things without traditional forms of energy, then that would be the most amazing thing ever. And that's what scientists would leap to study. But they know that there isn't good evidence to go and look into these things. So there's no cover up. I can't be bothered. It's just, unfortunately, it's the standard of evidence.
Yes, totally agree. All right, last question. This is from Bob. I'm going to go one step farther than Kenny. Why do we have a whole field of folks that believe in ancient alien theory? What do you think about, I don't know how to say his name. I think that's the big hair
guy. Yeah, Giorgio. He's basically an entertainer, but I think, again, I think he has probably some degree of belief himself in that type of thing. But ancient aliens is a phenomenon. There's ancient aliens conferences. There's large numbers of people who are into the ancient aliens theory of various forms. I think in some ways it's almost like a combination of two things. One, it's very entertaining, It's fun to watch these things. You know, you get that drip of new things, and there's like 50 seasons of it. And another, it's in a more fundamental thing. It explains where we came from, and it kind of gives sense and meaning to the universe. That aliens came to the planet and created humans, and that they're probably still coming to the planet and checking up on us. And so aliens become gods, and aliens replace religion. And religion is something that has naturally arisen in humans because it's something that fulfills a need in our minds. And so ancient aliens is kind of a religion.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's a belief system. And then, yeah, I see it. I haven't been to an ancient alien conference. I've been to MUFON conferences, and it's I would venture to guess it's
interesting.
The same. Yeah. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear the ideas and beliefs that are spoken about, not only just spoken about, but spoken with such confidence in being true. Yeah.
And you know there's different levels and I don't know, cliques within or cliques, I believe you say in America.
Right.
Of UFO people and with paranormal people. Some people are just kind of like, oh, I want to find out what these lights in the sky are. And some people are like, I get abducted every night by aliens in my bedroom, and everything in between. And with the paranormal, there's Facebook groups that I'm a member of on Facebook, and some of them are just like ghost hunters, and some of them are like hardcore paranormal. I think one's actually called hardcore paranormal. And these are people who, post pictures of the kitchen windows all the time because they think they're seeing things in their kitchen windows.
Yep.
So there's a range of people, and the same thing with UFOs. Some people are more kind of hard UFO, like technology and stuff like that, and some people think that they are the chariots of the gods or angelic beings from another dimension.
Right.
So it's an interesting a pantheon of ideas there.
Very cool. All right, we are at the end, so we can wrap this up. I've taken 2 hours of your night, so I totally appreciate it. It's great talking to you again. Haven't seen you for a while. But for everyone else out there, do you have anything coming up? You have any? You mentioned that you might be working on a part 2 to this awesome book.
Yeah, that's going to be a while. I think my next thing is going to be getting my podcast up and running again, which is good practice. Yeah, the camera is still working, and I'm currently embroiled in complicated analysis of voter returns and whatnot.
Yes,
trying to figure out if the election is a fraud or not.
Yeah, I see it. Like I'm looking at Metabunk right now, and I see a lot. The top stuff is all political and election stuff.
I'm learning stuff about elections that I never will need ever again.
So everyone enjoyed the show. Looks like everyone had a great time. They learned a lot, which is good. That's what this show is about. Open discussion, learning. Definitely, I would suggest. I mean, I usually do a book of the week recommendation, and I think I've already recommended your book once, but it's worth a second recommendation since you're on. But definitely buy this one. It's really, really good. I can't recommend it enough. I mean, you've watched this guy for the last 2 hours, and everything that he is here, you get from this book. So it's good explanations. It's respectful. And you get people's personal stories to go along with all the technical information. So it's really, really good read. I highly recommend it. And with that, I'm going to say that basic announcements. I don't have too many things going on. Actually, I have no events for the rest of the year. So if anyone has an event, I don't think you will, because we're probably going to go into another lockdown. But I love doing podcasts. If you have one, if you want a skeptic on, talk to Mick or reach out to me. I would love to do it. Absolutely love doing those kind of things. And let's see, tomorrow night, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, I will be on 3 Tortured Souls again. And we're going to have a good show. We're actually going to be talking about poltergeists and getting into the history and science and all kinds of things with that. Around good discussion. There will be no Skeptical Help Bar next week. I know you guys are going to be upset about it, but I have a secret project that I'm working on, and it has to do with some online classes that, unfortunately, some of the classes are Friday night, and I have to attend, so I can report on them later. So there will be no Skeptical Help Bar next week. There will be a 3 Tortured Souls tomorrow and next Saturday. So don't worry about that. And then if you're interested in any kind of T-shirts, science-themed T-shirts, I have my Teespring store called Scientific Skepticism. Check it out. And there's lots of designs on there. And again, the money from the purchases goes directly back into this work. It goes to support the podcast. It goes to support the things I have to acquire or attend in order to report back to you guys on them. So every little bit helps. And I think that's about it. I'm going to wrap it up. Mick, please stay on the line for just a moment while I hit my outro video, and which is new. I did a little new video, so I hope everyone enjoys it. And until next time, everyone, never stop learning. See you later.
See ya.